The contractions hit like a sledgehammer to my spine, and I knew this was it. 9 months of carrying my sister's baby, and now he was ready to meet the world. "Lucy! She's crowning!" the nurse called out, and I watched my older sister rush to the side of the hospital bed, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together like she was praying. My name is Eliza, and I thought I was doing the most beautiful thing in the world for the person I loved most. God, was I wrong? "You're doing amazing, Eliza," Lucy whispered, but her eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the monitor, watching the baby's heartbeat like she was tracking stock prices. Just a few more pushes. Daniel stood behind her, his expensive suit somehow still crisp despite spending the last 12 hours in this sterile room. He had his phone out, recording everything, but the camera wasn't pointed at me. It was angled toward where the baby would emerge. "I can see his head," Dr. Martinez announced. "One more big push, Eliza." I gripped the bed rails and bore down with everything I had. The pain was indescribable, but all I could think about was how happy Lucy would be. How complete their little family would finally become after years of failed IVF treatments and miscarriages. The baby's cry filled the room, sharp and demanding, and I collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but euphoric. "He's perfect," Dr. Martinez said, holding up this tiny, wrinkled miracle. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs. I reached out instinctively, wanting to hold him, but Lucy was already there. The doctor placed him directly into her arms, and she started crying, these soft, grateful tears that made my heart swell. "Thank you," she whispered to me, but she never looked away from the baby. "Thank you so much, Eliza." Daniel moved closer, wrapping his arms around both Lucy and the baby. They looked like a magazine ad for the perfect family. I felt this warm glow spreading through my chest, despite the pain and exhaustion. "What are you going to name him?" I asked, trying to sit up a little. "Amos," Lucy said softly. "Amos Daniel." The nurse came over to check my vitals, and I watched Lucy and Daniel cooing over little Amos. They were so absorbed in him, whispering to each other about his tiny features, his perfect little hands. "The paperwork will be ready in about an hour," Dr. Martinez told them. "Then you can take him to the nursery for his first feeding." That's when something shifted. Lucy's expression changed, became more businesslike. She handed Amos to Daniel and turned to face me fully for the first time since the delivery. "Eliza," she said, her voice different now, colder. "I need you to understand something." I blinked, confused by her tone. "What do you mean?" "This baby is ours now. Mine and Daniel's. We appreciate what you've done, but your part in this is over." The words hit me like ice water. "Lucy, what are you talking about?" Daniel stepped forward, still holding Amos, but his expression had hardened too. "We think it would be best if you maintained some distance going forward, for everyone's sake." "Distance?" I couldn't process what they were saying. "He's my nephew. You're my sister." "No," Lucy said firmly. "He's our son, and you were our surrogate. There's a difference." The nurse looked uncomfortable and quietly slipped out of the room. I felt like I was drowning, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "Lucy, I carried him for 9 months. I felt every kick, every hiccup. I gave up law school for this year to—" "And we're grateful," Daniel interrupted. "But we need to establish boundaries now. Clean breaks are better for attachment purposes." I stared at my sister, searching her face for any trace of the woman who used to braid my hair and sneak me cookies before dinner. But her eyes were cold, calculating. "Your services are no longer required," Lucy said, each word precise and cutting. "He's ours now." The room went dead silent except for Amos's soft breathing. I felt something crack inside my chest, something that had been holding my world together. They walked out without another word, taking the baby with them, leaving me alone in that sterile room with the smell of antiseptic and the echo of my sister's betrayal. That's when I knew I had to fight back. I was still staring at the door they'd walked through when it opened again. For a split second, I thought Lucy had come back to apologize, to tell me this was all some horrible misunderstanding. Instead, Daniel walked in alone, carrying a manila envelope. "I almost forgot," he said, like he was delivering takeout. He set the envelope on my bedside table. "Your compensation." I looked at the envelope like it might bite me. "My what?" "The final payment, as agreed in the contract." He straightened his tie. "Lucy wanted me to remind you that the confidentiality clause is still in effect. We'd prefer if you didn't discuss the details of this arrangement with anyone." "Details of this arrangement?" My voice cracked. "Daniel, I'm her sister, and we appreciate the family discount," he said without a trace of irony. "But business is business, Eliza. You provided a service, we're compensating you fairly, and now we all move on with our lives." The door opened again, and my mother rushed in, her face flushed from running down the hospital corridor. "Oh, honey, how are you feeling?" Mom wrapped me in a hug that smelled like her lavender perfume and anxiety. "I got here as fast as I could after Lucy called." "Where is she?" I asked. "Getting Amos settled in the nursery." "She's so happy, Eliza. You've given her such a gift." Mom's eyes were bright with tears. "I'm so proud of you both." Daniel cleared his throat. "I should go check on them. Eliza, thank you again for everything." He paused at the door. "I trust we understand each other about moving forward." After he left, Mom sat on the edge of my bed, still beaming. "I can't believe I'm finally a grandmother. Did you see how tiny his fingers are?" "Mom, did Lucy say anything to you about boundaries?" Her smile flickered. "What do you mean?" "She told me I need to keep my distance, that my part in this is over." Mom's hands twisted in her lap. "Well, honey, you know how new mothers can be. Very protective. I'm sure once she settles in. She called me a surrogate, Mom, like I was hired help. You were technically... I'm her sister." The words exploded out of me. "I didn't do this for money. I did it because I love her." Mom reached for my hand. "I know you did, sweetheart. And Lucy knows that too. She's just overwhelmed right now. Give her some time." "Time for what? To pretend I don't exist?" "Don't be dramatic, Eliza. Your family. That will never change." But something in her voice told me she wasn't entirely convinced either. After Mom left to give Lucy some support, I was alone again. I picked up the envelope Daniel had left, my hands shaking. Inside was a check for $25,000 and a typed note on Lucy's personal stationery. "Eliza, thank you for your sacrifice. This should help you get back on your feet and return to law school. Please respect our need for space as we bond with our son. Our son, not the baby or Amos. Our son." I grabbed my phone and called Iris, my best friend since college. She answered on the first ring. "Eliza, how did it go? Is the baby okay?" "Iris, I need you to come to the hospital, now." "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Just, please, room 314, and don't tell anyone you're coming." She arrived 40 minutes later with coffee and that concerned look she got when she knew I was about to fall apart. I told her everything: Lucy's cold dismissal, Daniel's business transaction speech, the check, the note. "They paid you off," Iris said flatly, "like you were some kind of service provider." "That's exactly what they did." "And your mom?" "Thinks I'm being dramatic. That Lucy just needs time to adjust." Iris set down her coffee and looked at me hard. "Eliza, what aren't you telling me?" I hesitated. During the pregnancy, there had been moments, small things that seemed off at the time, but that I'd dismissed. Lucy's comments about keeping things professional. Daniel's insistence on handling all the medical appointments himself. The way they'd both reacted when I'd mentioned wanting to babysit sometimes. There were signs, I admitted. Things they said during the pregnancy. I thought I was being paranoid. What kind of things? Lucy asked me once if I was getting too attached. When I said I loved feeling him move, she got this look on her face, like I'd said something inappropriate. Iris's jaw tightened. What else? Daniel made a joke about me being their rental womb. I laughed it off, but Lucy didn't correct him. She just smiled. Jesus, Eliza. And last month, when I suggested we should start thinking about how often I'd see him after he was born, Lucy said we'd cross that bridge when we came to it. But she wouldn't look at me when she said it. Iris stood up and started pacing. They planned this. They knew from the beginning they were going to cut you out. I think so. What are you going to do? I looked at the check again, at Lucy's neat handwriting dismissing 9 months of my life like a business transaction. I'm going to fight back. 2 days later, I was sitting in Iris's living room, still sore from delivery but determined. Her partner Rowan was there too, looking through a stack of papers with the focused intensity that made him such a good attorney. Tell me again about the contract signing, Iris said, refilling my tea. Every detail you can remember. I closed my eyes, thinking back to that day 6 months ago. We met at Penelope's office. She's been the family lawyer forever, handled my parents' wills, Lucy's house purchase, everything. And Penelope reviewed the surrogacy agreement? Rowan asked without looking up. She was supposed to, but her assistant had just quit, and she was juggling 3 other cases. She kept getting interrupted by phone calls. Iris leaned forward. What kind of interruptions? Her biggest client was having some crisis. She must have taken 5 calls during our meeting. Each time she'd put us on hold and step out of the room. So she was distracted, Rowan said. Completely. At one point, she came back from a call and couldn't even remember which clause we'd been discussing. Rowan finally looked up. And you had the contract beforehand? To review? This was the part I'd been dreading to admit. Lucy gave me a copy 3 days before the signing. Said I should look it over, make sure I was comfortable with everything. And? I took a deep breath. I made some changes. Iris nearly choked on her coffee. What kind of changes? Small ones. I was in my 3rd year of law school before I took leave, remember? I know how to read contracts. Rowan set down the papers. Eliza, what exactly did you change? There was a clause about parental rights termination. The original version said my rights would be automatically terminated upon birth. I modified it. How? I changed it to say my rights would be terminated upon completion of all legal documentation and a mandatory 7-day waiting period. The room went dead silent. You changed the contract and didn't tell them? Iris asked. I was protecting myself. Something felt off about how eager they were to rush through everything. Lucy kept pushing to sign earlier, to get it finalized as quickly as possible. Rowan was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Did you initial the changes? Yes, and I made sure the new version was what got signed. But Penelope didn't catch it. She was on another call when we got to that section. She just flipped through, saw our signatures, and notarized it. Iris started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that comes when something is so unbelievable you can't process it any other way. So legally speaking, Rowan said slowly, you're still the mother. For now. Until the 7-day period expires and all the documentation is filed. When does the 7 days end? I checked my phone. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Rowan jumped up and started pacing. We need to see this contract. Now. I have a copy in my apartment. No, we need the signed original, the one that's filed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Lucy's contact. My finger hovered over her name. I can't just ask her for it. She'll know something's up. What about Penelope? Iris suggested. She'd have to give it to me if I requested it, right? I looked at Rowan. Client privilege? You're all clients on this contract. She'd have to provide a copy to any party who requests it. I dialed Penelope's office. her new assistant answered. "Hi, this is Eliza. I need a copy of the surrogacy agreement I signed last month. Can I pick it up today? Let me check with Ms. Anderson. Can you hold?" The hold music felt like it lasted forever. Finally, the assistant came back. "She says you can pick it up anytime before 5. Do you need it notarized or certified?" "Just a regular copy is fine." After I hung up, Rowan was already grabbing his keys. "We're going now," he said. All of us. An hour later, we were back in Iris's living room. Rowan had the contract spread across the coffee table, a yellow highlighter in his hand. "Here," he said, pointing to a section near the bottom. Clause 12b. Biological mother's parental rights shall be terminated upon completion of all legal documentation and a mandatory 7-day waiting period following birth. "And they signed this version?" Iris asked. "Both of them. Look." I pointed to Lucy and Daniel's signatures at the bottom. Rowan sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "Eliza, do you understand what this means? That I still have legal rights to Amos? More than that, until tomorrow at 3 p.m., you are legally his mother. Not Lucy. You." My phone buzzed with a text from Lucy. "Family group chat. Bringing our sweet boy home tomorrow. Can't wait to start our new life as a family of 3. I showed the message to Iris and Rowan. "Over my dead body," I said. "We need to file an emergency injunction," Rowan said, already pulling out his laptop. "Today? Before they try to take him home." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means we go to court and ask a judge to prevent them from removing Amos from the hospital until this gets sorted out." Iris was reading over the contract again. "But won't they just argue that Eliza is being vindictive? That she's trying to steal their baby? That's why we need to move fast and smart," Rowan said, typing rapidly. "We're not claiming Eliza wants to keep the baby permanently. We're just saying the legal process wasn't completed properly." My phone rang. Lucy's name flashed on the screen. "Don't answer it," Rowan said immediately. "But what if—" "Don't. Answer. It." The call went to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. "She knows something's wrong," I said. "Good. Let her sweat." 3 hours later, we were standing in the courthouse. Rowan had filed the emergency petition, and we were waiting to see if a judge would hear us. "Ms. Walton?" A clerk appeared. "Judge Martinez will see you in chambers in 5 minutes." "Different Martinez than the doctor?" I asked Rowan. "Different Martinez. And lucky for us, she's known for being thorough." Judge Martinez was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable and had no patience for nonsense. "Mr. Simmons," she said to Rowan, "explain to me why I should prevent these people from taking home their baby." "Your Honor, the surrogacy agreement clearly states that parental rights don't transfer until all legal documentation is complete and a 7-day waiting period has elapsed. That period doesn't end until tomorrow at 3 p.m. She flipped through the contract. "And the respondents signed this version?" "Yes, Your Honor. Both parties." "Ms. Walton," Judge Martinez turned to me. "What is it you're asking for here? Do you want to keep this child?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Did I want to keep Amos? I'd carried him for 9 months, felt every kick, every movement. But I'd also agreed to give him to Lucy and Daniel. "I want them to follow the law, Your Honor. And I want to be treated with respect, not discarded like I was nothing." That's not really an answer to my question. I took a deep breath. I don't know yet. But I deserve the legal right to make that decision during the time period I'm entitled to. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. "I'm granting a temporary restraining order. The child remains at the hospital until we can have a full hearing. I'm scheduling that for Friday morning." As we walked out of the courthouse, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Missed calls from Lucy, Daniel, Mom, even Dad. "Turn it off," Rowan advised. "Let them go through your attorney now." "You're my attorney?" "As of right now, yes." We drove straight to the hospital. At the nurse's station, I could see Lucy and Daniel through the nursery window. Lucy was holding Amos, and Daniel was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. "Ms. Walton," the head nurse approached us. "We received the court order. The baby cannot be discharged until further notice." "Thank you." Lucy must have seen me through the window because she came storming out of the nursery, her face flushed with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "Following the contract we all signed. This is insane, Eliza. He's our baby." "Actually," Rowan stepped forward, "legally speaking, he's not. Not until tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the earliest." Daniel joined us, his jaw clenched. "Who is this?" "My attorney." "Your attorney?" Daniel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You hired a lawyer? Against your own sister?" "You treated me like hired help, so I'm acting like it." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Eliza, please, don't do this. You're going to ruin everything." "I'm not ruining anything. I'm protecting my rights." "Your rights?" Daniel's voice was getting louder. "You have no rights. You were a surrogate." "Keep your voice down," a nurse warned. "This is a hospital." Mom appeared at the end of the hallway, looking frantic. "What's going on?" "Lucy called me crying, saying something about lawyers and courts." "Ask your other daughter," Lucy said bitterly. "She's trying to steal our baby." "I'm not stealing anything," I said. "I'm making sure the legal process is followed correctly." Mom looked between us, confused and upset. "Can't you two work this out? You're sisters." "Tell that to Lucy," I said. "She's the one who decided I was just a service provider." "That's not what Your services are no longer required," I quoted back to her. "He's ours now. Ring any bells?" Lucy's face went white. Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. "We need to call our lawyer," he said. "Good idea," Rowan replied. "Have them call me." As they walked away, Mom stayed behind, looking at me with disappointment. "Eliza, honey, what are you really trying to accomplish here?" "Justice, Mom, and maybe a little respect." "At what cost?" I looked through the nursery window at Amos, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet, completely unaware that his entire world was about to change. I guess we'll find out. By Thursday morning, the story had leaked. I woke up to 17 missed calls and a text from my cousin Sarah. "Is it true you're suing Lucy for the baby? It's all over Facebook." I called Rowan immediately. "How did this get out?" "Could be anyone. Court filings are public record, or maybe someone at the hospital talked." My phone rang. "Unknown number." "Don't answer," Rowan said. "Probably a reporter." "A reporter?" Local custody battles involving surrogacy make good headlines, especially when it's family. I ignored the call, but then my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "We need to talk. Meet me at Starbucks on 5th Street. 1 hour. Come alone." "Absolutely not," Iris said when I showed her the message. "That sounds like a threat." "Or a bribe," Rowan added. "Don't go." But something in Daniel's tone made me curious. What if he wants to apologize? To work something out? Then he can do it through lawyers. I went anyway. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. "What do you want, Daniel?" He slid an envelope across the table. $50,000. Cash. You drop the legal action, we all move on. I didn't touch the envelope. "You think you can buy me off?" "I think you're a smart woman who understands that this situation benefits no one. Lucy is falling apart. Your parents are devastated. And that baby needs stability, not a custody battle." "That baby has a name. Amos." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Don't get attached, Eliza. You're not keeping him." "Maybe not, but that's my decision to make." "Is it really? Or are you just trying to hurt Lucy because you're jealous?" The accusation hit like a slap. Jealous of what? Her success, her marriage, her life. You've always been in her shadow, and now you see a chance to destroy what she's built. I stood up. You don't know anything about me. I know you dropped out of law school. I know you're 29 and single with no real career prospects. I know you agreed to be our surrogate because you needed the money and the purpose. Each word was calculated to wound. You're wrong.
Am I? Take the money, Eliza. Start over somewhere else. Lucy and I will make sure Amos has a good life. Like you made sure I'd have a good relationship with him? Daniel leaned back. We never promised you anything beyond what was in the contract. The contract you clearly didn't read carefully enough. His face darkened. That was a mistake. One we're going to fix. What's that supposed to mean?
It means we have resources you don't. Lawyers, money, connections. You think one little clause is going to stand up against all of that? I grabbed the envelope and threw it back at him. Keep your money. As I walked out, I heard him call after me. This isn't over, Eliza. I drove straight to Rowan's office, my hands shaking. He listened to my account of the meeting, taking notes. He threatened you, Rowan said. That was incredibly stupid of him. What do you mean? Did you record the conversation? No, but I stopped. Wait, yes, I did. I pulled out my phone. I have a voice memo app that I accidentally turned on when I was trying to silence my phone. Rowan's eyes lit up. Play it. We listened to the entire conversation. Daniel's voice came through clearly. The bribe attempt, the personal attacks, the veiled threats. This is gold, Rowan said. We're adding this to our evidence file. That evening, I was at my parents' house for what Mom had called an emergency family meeting. Dad was pacing the living room while Mom sat on the couch, wringing her hands. This has gone too far, Mom said as soon as I walked in. The whole town is talking about it. Let them talk, Dad said. Eliza's doing what she has to do. She's destroying the family, Travis. Lucy destroyed the family when she treated our daughter like a broodmare.
Mom started crying. I just want my girls to love each other again. That ship sailed when Lucy decided I was disposable, I said. You don't mean that. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Dad went to answer it, and I heard Penelope's voice in the hallway. I need to speak with Eliza, she said, sounding agitated. It's about the contract. We all gathered in the living room. Penelope looked nervous, clutching a briefcase. I made a mistake, she said without preamble. A big one.
What kind of mistake? I asked. I should have caught your changes to the contract, but I was distracted, and I didn't review it properly before the signing. Okay. But that's not the worst part. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. I've been going through my files, and I found something troubling. She handed me a document. It was a copy of the original surrogacy agreement, the one Lucy had given me to review. Look at the signature page, Penelope said. I flipped to the back and felt my blood run cold. There were already signatures on it. Lucy's and Daniel's, dated 3 days before our meeting. They signed the original version before you ever saw it, Penelope said, which means they never intended for me to have any input, I finished. They were just going through the motions. Dad exploded. Those lying, manipulative—
There's more, Penelope interrupted. Daniel called me yesterday. He wanted to know if there was any way to invalidate the contract you actually signed. When I told him no, he asked about other options. What kind of options? He wanted to know if we could claim you were mentally unstable, that the pregnancy hormones affected your judgment. The room went dead silent. He what? Mom whispered. I told him absolutely not. But Eliza, you need to know. They're not going to give up easily.
I looked at the pre-signed contract in my hands, evidence of their deception from the very beginning. Neither am I. Friday morning arrived with a media circus outside the courthouse. 3 news vans were parked on the street, and I could see reporters with cameras waiting by the entrance. Local news picked it up, Rowan explained as we walked through the back entrance. Sister versus sister custody battle. It's catnip for them. Inside, Lucy and Daniel were already seated with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who I recognized from billboards around town. Margaret something. She handled high-profile divorces and corporate disputes. Lucy looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, her expression hardened. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Martinez presiding.
Judge Martinez took her seat and surveyed the packed courtroom. This is a custody hearing, not a circus. Anyone who disrupts these proceedings will be removed. Margaret stood first. Your Honor, my clients are the intended parents in a straightforward surrogacy arrangement. Ms. Walton is attempting to manipulate a minor clerical error to steal their child. Objection to the characterization, Rowan said. The contract modification was not clerical. It was deliberate and legally binding.
Noted. Ms. Margaret, present your case. Margaret called Daniel to the stand first. He looked composed, professional in his navy suit. Mr. Hayes, please describe your relationship with the respondent. Eliza is my sister-in-law. When my wife Lucy couldn't conceive, Eliza generously offered to be our surrogate. And what was your understanding of the arrangement? That she would carry our child, and then we would raise him as our son. It was always meant to be temporary. Did you have any indication that Ms. Walton intended to keep the baby? Daniel paused, glancing at me. Not initially, but during the pregnancy, she became increasingly possessive. Can you give an example? She started referring to the baby as her baby. She wanted to be involved in naming decisions. She talked about babysitting and being a big part of his life. I watched Lucy nod along, her face a mask of wounded innocence. And how did you respond to these concerns? We tried to be gentle but firm about boundaries. We didn't want to hurt her feelings, but we needed her to understand that this was our child. Rowan stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hayes, did you and your wife sign the original surrogacy contract before Ms. Walton ever saw it? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall the exact timeline. Let me refresh your memory. Rowan held up the pre-signed document. This is the original contract, dated 3 days before your meeting with Ms. Walton. Are these your signatures? We may have signed a preliminary version. Yes or no, Mr. Hayes? Are these your signatures? Yes. So you had already committed to terms before allowing Ms. Walton to review the agreement? We were eager to move forward. Eager enough to deceive your sister-in-law about having input in the process? Margaret objected, but the damage was done. The courtroom murmured, and I saw several people shaking their heads. Lucy took the stand next. She was crying before she even sat down. Mrs. Hayes, how has this situation affected you? It's been devastating, Lucy sobbed. I've wanted to be a mother for so long. We've been through years of failed treatments, miscarriages. When Eliza offered to help, I thought it was a miracle. And now I'm terrified I'll never get to hold my son again. Eliza is using him as a weapon to hurt me. Why do you think she's doing this? Lucy looked directly at me. Because she's always resented my success, my marriage, my happiness. This is her way of destroying everything I've worked for. The accusation hung in the air like poison. I felt every eye in the courtroom on me. When Rowan cross-examined Lucy, he was gentler, but no less effective. Mrs. Hayes, what exactly did you say to your sister immediately after the birth? I thanked her for the gift she'd given us. Is that all you said? Lucy hesitated. I may have mentioned that we needed to establish boundaries. Your exact words, please. I don't remember exactly. Let me help you. Rowan pulled out his phone. I have a recording of a conversation between Ms. Walton and her friend, where she recounted your words immediately after the birth. Would you like me to play it? Lucy's face went white. That's not. Your services are no longer required. He's ours now. Rowan's voice was clear and cold. Do those words sound familiar? The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order! I will have order! Margaret was whispering frantically to Lucy and Daniel. I could see panic in their eyes. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand on shaking legs, acutely aware of the cameras in the back of the room. Ms. Walton, Rowan began, why did you agree to be a surrogate for your sister? Because I love her. Because I wanted to help her become a mother. And what did you expect your relationship with the child to be? I expected to be his aunt, to be part of his life, to watch him grow up and know that I helped bring him into the world. When did that expectation change?
I looked at Lucy, who was staring at her hands. The moment he was born. When Lucy looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer needed. How did that make you feel? Like I'd been used. Like 9 months of my life, of carrying her child, of sacrificing my body and my education, meant nothing to her. Do you want to keep the baby, Ms. Walton? The question I'd been dreading. The entire courtroom held its breath.
I want what's best for Amos. But I also want to be treated like a human being, not a rental womb. And I want Lucy and Daniel to be held accountable for their lies. Judge Martinez called a recess. As we filed out, I heard Lucy crying in the hallway. This is all your fault, she was saying to Daniel. I told you we should have been nicer to her. It's too late for that now, he replied grimly. I realized he was right. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. After the recess, Judge Martinez returned with a stern expression. The courtroom was packed tighter than before. Word had spread, and I could see neighbors, extended family members, and people I didn't even recognize filling the seats. Before I render my decision, Judge Martinez said, I want to address some additional evidence that has come to light. Margaret looked confused. Your Honor, we weren't informed of any new evidence. Mr. Simmons brought it to my attention during the recess. Judge Martinez held up a folder. It appears there are some irregularities in the documentation filed with this court. Daniel went rigid in his seat. Lucy grabbed his arm. Mr. Hayes, did you or did you not attempt to file amended birth certificate paperwork yesterday without Ms. Walton's knowledge or consent? The question hit like a bomb. Margaret was frantically whispering to Daniel, but he looked like a deer in headlights. Your Honor, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I have the filing right here. Submitted yesterday at 4:47 p.m. It lists you and your wife as the sole legal parents, with no mention of the surrogacy arrangement or the pending custody issue. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I stared at Daniel in shock. He'd tried to make himself Amos's legal father while we were in court fighting over custody. That's fraud, Rowan said, standing up. Attempted fraud of the court system. Margaret was on her feet. Your Honor, if my client filed paperwork, it was surely an administrative error that would have given your clients legal custody while this case was pending? Judge Martinez's voice was ice cold. Mr. Hayes, stand up. Daniel rose slowly, his face ashen. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could manipulate the system while asking this court to grant you custody? Your Honor, I was just trying to protect my family by committing fraud. Lucy started crying again, but these weren't the composed tears from her testimony. These were desperate, panicked sobs. I didn't know, she kept saying. I didn't know he did that. Judge Martinez turned to me. Ms. Walton, in light of this new information, I need to ask you directly, what outcome are you seeking here? The entire courtroom fell silent. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. I stood up slowly. Your Honor, I want joint custody.
The word surprised even me. I hadn't planned to say that. Joint custody? Judge Martinez repeated. Yes. I carried Amos for 9 months. I felt every kick, every movement. I gave up a year of my life, my education, my body to bring him into this world. I'm not trying to steal him from Lucy and Daniel, but I'm not going to be erased from his life either. Lucy's sobs got louder. No, 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 he's my baby. My baby.
He's both of ours, I said, looking directly at her. Whether you like it or not. Margaret was shaking her head. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Surrogates don't typically retain parental rights. Surrogates typically don't get treated like disposable incubators either, Rowan interrupted. And their intended parents don't typically commit fraud. Judge Martinez held up her hand for silence. I've heard enough. This case presents several troubling elements: deception in the contract process, attempted fraud of the court system, and a clear breakdown in family relationships. She paused, looking at each of us in turn. However, at the center of all this is a newborn child who deserves stability and love. Mr. Hayes, your attempted filing of fraudulent documents is deeply concerning and will be referred to the district attorney's office for review. Daniel's face went white. Margaret grabbed his arm. Mrs. Hayes, while I understand your desire to be a mother, your treatment of your sister was callous and legally problematic. Lucy was still crying, but quieter now. Ms. Walton, your modification of the contract, while legally valid, shows a level of distrust that suggests this arrangement was problematic from the beginning. I held my breath. Therefore, I am granting temporary joint custody. Ms. Walton will have visitation rights and input on major decisions regarding the child's welfare. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months to determine if it should be made permanent. The courtroom exploded. Lucy screamed, "No!" and collapsed into Daniel's arms. Margaret was already gathering her papers, clearly planning an appeal. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued over the noise, I am ordering family mediation for all parties. This child deserves better than a family torn apart by greed and manipulation. As the gavel came down, I felt a strange mix of victory and devastation. I'd won, but at what cost? Lucy was being helped out of the courtroom, still sobbing. As she passed my row, she stopped and looked at me with pure hatred. I will never forgive you for this, she whispered. Never. Daniel paused too, his face cold and calculating. This isn't over, Eliza. We'll appeal. We'll fight this until we win. Good luck with that fraud charge, I replied. After they left, the courtroom slowly emptied. Mom and Dad approached me, their faces showing the strain of the last week. Are you happy now? Mom asked quietly. I'm not sure happy is the right word. Dad put his arm around me. You did what you had to do, sweetheart. Did I? Or did I just destroy our family over pride? Lucy destroyed this family the moment she decided you were disposable, Dad said firmly. You just refused to stay disposed of. Rowan was packing up his briefcase. The fraud investigation will take a few weeks. Daniel could face criminal charges. What does that mean for custody? It strengthens your position significantly. Courts don't look kindly on parents who try to manipulate the system. As we walked out of the courthouse, reporters shouted questions at me. I ignored them all, but I could hear the headlines already forming. Sister wins custody. Battle against surrogate family. Surrogacy gone wrong. Family torn apart. That evening, I sat in the hospital nursery, holding Amos for the first time since his birth. He was so small, so perfect, completely unaware that his entire world had just been turned upside down. What have I done to you, little guy? I whispered. A nurse approached. Ms. Walton, your sister is here. She's asking to see the baby. I looked up to see Lucy standing in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the room that had become our battlefield. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I nodded, still holding Amos. I think we need to. Lucy sat down in the chair across from me, her hands trembling.
The nursery was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and Amos's gentle breathing. "He's beautiful," she whispered, staring at the baby in my arms. "He is."
I've been awake for 3 days straight, just thinking about what I said to you, what we did to you. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to make this easy for her. Daniel's been arrested, she continued. The fraud charges. His law firm suspended him pending investigation. I'm sorry. Are you? I looked at her directly. I'm sorry your husband is an idiot who thought he could outsmart the legal system. I'm not sorry he got caught.
Lucy's face crumpled. "Everything's falling apart, Eliza. The partners at Daniel's firm are talking about termination. My friends won't return my calls. Mom won't even look at me. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was disposable. I know I was horrible to you." She leaned forward, but I was so scared. Scared of what? Of losing him, of you changing your mind, of not being enough. Her voice broke. I've wanted to be a mother for so long, and when it finally happened, I panicked. I thought if I pushed you away immediately, it would be easier, cleaner. Cleaner for who? For me, for us, for everyone. She wiped her eyes. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Amos stirred in my arms, making a soft sound. Both Lucy and I looked down at him. He has your nose, I said quietly. And your stubborn chin, Lucy replied with a watery smile. We sat in silence for a moment, both watching the baby sleep. What happens now? Lucy asked. I don't know. The court ordered mediation. We have to figure out how to co-parent. Do you really want that? Joint custody? I looked at Amos, then at my sister. I want him to know where he came from. I want him to understand that he was wanted by all of us, not just you and Daniel. And I want you to remember that family isn't disposable. Lucy nodded, tears streaming down her face. Can you ever forgive me? I don't know yet, but I'm willing to try. The nursery door opened and Mom walked in, looking exhausted. The nurse said you were both here. She looked between us uncertainly. How are we doing? We're talking, I said. That's more than you've done in a week. Mom sat down heavily. This whole situation has been a nightmare. It didn't have to be, Lucy said quietly. If I hadn't been so selfish, if you hadn't been so scared, I corrected. There's a difference. Mom looked surprised. You're defending her? I'm trying to understand her. There's a difference there too. Dad appeared in the doorway, followed by Iris. The small nursery was getting crowded. How's our boy doing? Dad asked, his voice gentle. He's perfect, Lucy and I said at the same time, then looked at each other in surprise. Well, that's something, Iris said dryly. A nurse approached our group. I'm sorry, but we can only have 2 visitors at a time in the nursery. I'll go, Lucy said, standing up. Eliza should have time with him. Lucy, wait. I stood up too, still holding Amos. Do you want to hold him? Her face lit up with desperate hope. Can I? I carefully transferred Amos to her arms. She held him like he was made of glass, tears falling onto his blanket. Hi, baby boy, she whispered. Mommy's here. Both your mommies are here. The words hit me like a punch to the chest, but not in a bad way. For the first time since this whole mess started, something felt right. We need ground rules, I said, if we're going to make this work. Lucy nodded eagerly. Whatever you want. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more treating me like hired help. Never again. I promise. And Daniel needs to get his act together. I won't have Amos around someone who thinks fraud is an acceptable problem-solving technique. He's getting counseling and anger management. The arrest was a wake-up call. Dad cleared his throat. What about the media circus? This whole thing's been on the news. Let them talk, I said. We know the truth now. That's what matters. Iris stepped forward. For what it's worth, I think you're both doing the right thing. Amos is lucky to have people who love him this much.
Even if we're terrible at showing it sometimes, Lucy added ruefully. Mom stood up and hugged both of us, careful not to disturb the baby. My girls, my stubborn, complicated, impossible girls. We get it from you, I said. You get it from your father, Mom replied, making Dad laugh. As the sun set outside the nursery windows, we took turns holding Amos, talking quietly about schedules and arrangements and the future. It wasn't perfect. There was still hurt and anger and a long road ahead of us. But it was a start. Eliza, Lucy said as we prepared to leave, thank you. For what? For fighting for him. For all of us. Even when we didn't deserve it. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. The Lucy who used to braid my hair and sneak me cookies. She was still there, underneath all the fear and desperation. That's what family does, I said. We fight for each other, even when we're fighting with each other. Especially then, Dad added. As we walked out of the hospital together, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's refusing to let them destroy you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's finding a way to save them too. Amos was going home with all of us. Messy, complicated, imperfect us. And maybe that was exactly how it was supposed to be.
Mama hasn't eaten and she's collapsed. I received an urgent SOS from my 6-year-old granddaughter, who lives with my daughter and her husband. Her desperate call left me stunned. Mama had shared her own food with me, so she hadn't eaten anything herself. Grandma, come quick. Help. My granddaughter's message was frantic, saying that my daughter could only moan weakly and seemed barely able to speak. I grabbed my car keys, praying for my daughter's safety, and rushed out of the house. What I found when I arrived was beyond anything I had prepared for. My name is Wendy, and I'm a 65-year-old housewife. Since my husband, who was 5 years older than me, passed away 2 years ago, I've been living alone in our now overly spacious home. Thanks to an inheritance from him and my own savings from working until I turned 60, I have no financial worries. My only daughter, Holly, is married and lives about an hour away with her husband. The highlights of my life are their occasional visits, especially when they bring my granddaughter, Lynn. After Holly graduated from university, she moved to Paris to pursue a career fueled by her passion for the French language. There she met Ted, who was working for an international company. They married and eventually returned to the United States. Once back, Holly chose to become a full-time homemaker to support Ted, and soon after, they welcomed their daughter, Lynn. Ted graduated from a prestigious university and now works for a leading tire company, which gives him an elite status, though he has faced many challenges along the way. His father struggled with job stability, frequently changing positions, which put a strain on their finances. Ted's mother worked part-time but didn't contribute significantly to the household income. Holly mentioned this hesitantly, suggesting that Ted's parents had unconventional approaches to work. Despite this, Ted was determined to improve his circumstances. He pursued his education with dedication, earning scholarships and working part-time to support himself. His hard work has earned him Holly's deep respect. Ted is committed to ensuring that Lynn doesn't face the same struggles he did. He is determined to save money and provide her with the freedom to choose her own path. She described him as a warm-hearted person. While it might seem self-serving to praise my own daughter, Holly truly is bright and kind-hearted. She has a good relationship with Ted, even though his parents are somewhat unconventional. Lynn has been growing up happily, and I had no cause for concern. However, there was a moment when I sensed something was wrong with Holly. It was when Lynn was 4 years old. During one of their visits, Holly appeared unusually drained. I asked, "What's wrong? You look pale. Are you feeling unwell, or is something bothering you?" "Well, there's a small concern," Holly admitted. She had been sending $700 a month to Ted's financially struggling parents, but they had recently asked for more without Ted knowing. It turns out my father-in-law had quit his job again. "That's troubling. It's challenging for just you and Ted to bear this burden," I said. Holly wanted to save money for Lynn's future, but it was becoming difficult with the ongoing financial support for her in-laws. She considered getting a job, but Ted had told her, "I often go on business trips, so I prefer you stay with Lynn." I want to support my parents since they're family, but I'm worried about how long we can sustain this situation. Hearing this, I felt uneasy and somewhat doubtful. I considered how I might assist and shared my idea with Ted. To my surprise, he welcomed the suggestion and agreed without hesitation. I was relieved at the time, but things didn't go as smoothly as hoped. 2 years later, a new issue emerged. Ted was assigned to work abroad and would be stationed there alone. His parents, concerned about Holly and Lynn managing on their own, proposed that they all move in together. Though Ted wanted to respect Holly's wishes, his parents' insistence made it difficult for her to refuse. Consequently, they decided to live together for the year until Ted's return. Knowing the challenges Holly had faced with her in-laws, I made it a point to stay in regular contact and check on her. It's okay, my father-in-law's new job seems to have a good environment. It might work out this time, and since Ted helped him find it, that's a positive sign. Despite her reassurance, a mother's intuition, or whatever you might call it, told me that something was off with Holly's tone. Then communication from her abruptly ceased. I tried reaching out multiple times, but all I got were voicemails and no replies. After 6 months of Ted being away, I finally managed to reconnect with Holly. Hello, Holly, I'm relieved to finally get through. Summer is almost over. How are you doing? I'm fine. I was hoping you and Lynn would visit during the summer vacation. Mom, I'm sorry. We've been really busy. I need to go now. I'll talk to you later. Wait, but before I could say more, the call abruptly ended. Holly's voice had sounded noticeably less upbeat. What's going on, Holly? I haven't seen you in over 6 months. Are you both really okay? My anxiety grew, and I realized I couldn't wait any longer. Just then, an unexpected call came through from Holly's phone. Mom doesn't have any food and she's collapsed. The distressed voice of my granddaughter, Lynn, came through the line. Lynn, what's happening? I asked urgently. Mom gave her food to me, so she hasn't eaten anything. Grandma, please come help us. From the tearful voice on the phone, I could tell Holly was exhausted and struggling to communicate. Are there any adults around, like Grandpa or Grandma? If they find out I called, I'll be in trouble, Lynn said. That's when I recalled what Holly had mentioned. She had taught Lynn how to use her cell phone and delete the call history, so Lynn could expose the situation to Holly's in-laws if needed. Hold on, I'm on my way, I said, telling Lynn to stay somewhere safe. I quickly drove to the in-laws' house, my heart racing. Holly, I'm coming. As I drove, tears streamed down my face. I was filled with guilt for not realizing the situation sooner and seething with anger toward Holly's in-laws. What have they done to my precious daughter and granddaughter? I'll never forgive them. Fueled by my anger, I pressed the accelerator harder. When I arrived at the in-laws' house, I rang the doorbell, but there was no immediate response. After repeatedly pressing the button, a voice finally answered. Why are you ringing so much? Who is it? I'm Holly's mother. What? You didn't give any notice. Why are you here? It was clear Holly's father-in-law was surprised and hesitant to come to the door. I'm sorry for the unexpected visit, but I need to see Holly. May I come in? No. Holly and Lynn aren't here. Go home. I know they're here. Is there another reason you're not letting me in? Enough. Don't come back. Just then, a deep voice resonated from behind me. Before I could react, a man appeared in front of me. That voice, could it be? I heard sounds of movement from inside the house, and the front door opened to reveal a stunned father-in-law. Boss, what are you doing here? The man was the CEO of the company where Holly's father-in-law worked. After learning about the in-laws' financial demands from Holly, I had taken action discreetly. Without informing Holly, I reached out to Ted and introduced him to a company run by an old friend of mine. I wanted Holly's father-in-law to find employment there and achieve financial independence. The CEO, understating my requests, hired him under favorable conditions. To avoid any gratitude, I kept my connection with the CEO confidential, asking both Ted and the CEO to do the same. Sensing something was wrong after the earlier call, I contacted the CEO, and we rushed over together. The CEO said, I'm here to speak with you. Let me in, and walked into the in-laws' home. The father-in-law stood there, stunned and speechless, as I tried to follow. Holly's mother-in-law emerged from a room and blocked my path. You have no right to come in. The CEO quickly countered, No, she's with me. The in-laws appeared visibly shaken and terrified. Grandma, over here. Help mommy. Lynn's voice called out urgently. At that moment, Lynn rushed over and tugged at my hand. Lynn, you become so skinny. I noticed that my granddaughter looked much more gaunt than the last time I had seen her. Before I could voice my concern, Lynn urgently guided me towards the back of the house, leading me to a storage room under the stairs. Holly, in a place like this? I quickly opened the door and gasped in shock and sorrow. There inside the dimly lit room was my emaciated daughter, Holly. Mom, Holly murmured with drowsy eyes and tears streaming down her face. I gripped her frail hand tightly. I'm so relieved you're okay. Lynn told me you'd collapsed. We need to get you to a doctor right away. As I gently tried to lift Holly, the CEO stepped in to help. She doesn't need to see a doctor. Given her condition, are you really sure about that? We haven't done anything wrong, I responded, concerned. Liars, Mom always worked hard while you both just relaxed. You only gave her a small amount of food, and she even gave her own portion to me. From a recent call with my granddaughter, I learned that since moving in together, Holly had been forced to handle all the household chores from morning till night, like a servant. Despite Holly's efforts to please what she thought were her beloved husband's parents, they criticized her relentlessly. They complained about her cooking, her cleaning, and her parenting. They punished her by cutting back her meals and would say, if you can't do things properly, you belong in the storeroom. They even confiscated her mobile phone, purse, and bank book. Whenever she protested, they threatened to harm Lynn. I was horrified to discover this. Holly was enduring this abuse with her already limited food further reduced, all for Lynn's sake. Overwhelmed by constant unjust criticism and suffering from physical and mental exhaustion, Holly was unable to think clearly. Why are you acting like the victim? We only scolded her a little. This is a serious matter. She could be in a life-threatening condition. I intend to get a medical report. Don't exaggerate. Stay out of our family matters. It's a new. Holly is my cherished daughter, and so is Lynn. I can forgive you for what you've done to them. At that moment, Holly, clearly exhausted, suddenly broke down in tears. Mom, please stop. I'm afraid Ted will hate me. Holly, did he say something to you? He said he'd leave me and stop providing financial support. That's strange. I just spoke with Ted, and he mentioned that he's been sending $3,500 every month. At this revelation, the defiant expressions of my in-laws shifted to visible anxiety. It looks like you've been keeping the money Ted sent Holly for yourselves. You've been deceiving everyone. Does this mean the rumor about Ted having another girlfriend is also false? How could you drive Holly to this point? I will never forgive you for this. At that moment, the sound of the ambulance sirens approached, and the CEO went outside to direct the paramedics. As soon as he was out of sight, my father-in-law's demeanor shifted dramatically, and he gave me a cold, piercing stare. It's our son's money. Naturally, we have the right to use it. There's no reason for us to give it to a daughter-in-law like you. If you can't accept that, you should take the child and leave. So, this is why you've been harassing me almost every day, isn't it? Did you hear that, Ted? I spoke into my smartphone. I was on a call with Holly's husband, Ted, and relaying every word his parents were saying. What are you talking about? I turned the smartphone screen towards the in-laws with the speakerphone on. I will never forgive you for what you've done to my beloved family, my wife and child. I'm cutting off all support from now on. Ted's voice was filled with anger, and his parents could only tremble in response. My father-in-law bowed deeply towards the phone. Ted, I'm so sorry. We needed the money and didn't mean any harm. This isn't a joke. I'll be home soon, so be prepared. The CEO, returning with the paramedics, added sternly, there's no point in keeping such a ruthless man employed. I brought him in for Wendy's sake, but he's been a disappointment. Upon hearing this, the in-laws immediately shifted their demeanor, bowing and apologizing profusely to me. We apologize for how we've treated Holly. We're struggling financially and desperately need your help. Could you please talk to Ted and the CEO on our behalf? You must be joking. How can I forgive you? I'm reporting everything to the police. As I watched the paramedics carefully place Holly onto a stretcher, I offered a reassuring smile to my granddaughter. Lynn, you did wonderfully. You saved your mom. We'll go to the hospital now, and then we can rest at Grandma's house. Thank you, Grandma. At the hospital, both my daughter and granddaughter were diagnosed with malnutrition. Lynn was discharged the same day, but Holly, deeply traumatized, needed to be hospitalized for further treatment. Ted returned briefly to be with his wife and daughter, and his presence helped restore Lynn's smile and brought signs of recovery to Holly. I felt a profound sense of relief. As for the in-laws, they faced legal consequences after a thorough police investigation. The CEO had recorded their actions, which confirmed severe abuse. Since their home was rented, they were evicted, and a claim for $47,000 was filed, $30,000 for embezzlement and $17,000 for damages. Thanks to my connections with the CEO and reliable childhood friends, the in-laws will be required to repay the amount by working at a specific factory after their prison term. For now, the three of us are enjoying a peaceful time together, eagerly awaiting Ted's return. Once he's back, we plan to move in together at my place. I'm looking forward to a brighter future, supporting my daughter and son-in-law, and cherishing the joyful moments with my granddaughter. I never expected to hear Ken say, "I wish I had kids too." It caught me off guard. Ken had always blamed me for us not having children, acting as if it was entirely my fault, like he was the victim, wanting kids but unable to have them because of me. Even more shocking was discovering that he was secretly seeing my sister while pretending to work overtime. They think they're getting away with it, but their time is running out. One day, at Stacy's new house, I decided to confront the truth. I looked at the surprised Ken and said, "This child is yours." His face froze in shock, like a deer caught in headlights. I continued, "I believe we should take responsibility for our actions. I don't intend to keep pretending I don't know. I'm Maddie, just a regular housewife working part-time as a cashier at a supermarket. I met my husband Ken through a friend's introduction. My first impression of him was that of an ordinary businessman. He works for a nationally expanding trading company and moved to this area 3 years ago for a job transfer. I remember when he asked me, 'Is this your hometown, Maddie? If it's okay, could you recommend some local places? I'm in charge of finding a venue for an upcoming company Christmas party, and I'm struggling.' I replied, 'Yes, I've lived here since I was a child. Actually, there's a superb Italian restaurant nearby that would be perfect for the party. My hobby is visiting gourmet food places, and I'm good at finding new and delicious spots.' That's how Ken and I quickly became friends, bonding over restaurant recommendations. I'm not great at talking to men, but Ken took the lead, and we seem to get along fine. Next time, I'll find another delicious place. I hope it suits your taste, Maddie," Ken said. "Thank you. For me, it's more important who I eat with than what I eat, so I'm really happy to be invited by you, Ken." "Does that mean eating with you makes the meal more enjoyable and delicious?" I asked, feeling a little shy but excited. "I'm looking forward to the next time," he replied with a smile. I had always been clueless about love and had never had a serious relationship with a man, so I was thrilled when Ken asked me out. I thought he might make me happy. Around the same time, my friends started getting married, and then Ken proposed to me. "I'm not perfect, but I want to make Maddie the happiest. Let's get married," he said. "If it's with you, I'm happy. Let's take care of each other from now on," I agreed. And so, I married Ken, finally reaching what I thought was the pinnacle of happiness. Ken asked me to dedicate myself to our home, so with some regret, I quit my job. Unfortunately, that happiness didn't last. About a year after our marriage, I felt as if I had woken up from a dream. I've been thinking lately, I really want a child with Maddie, but we haven't been blessed with one yet, Ken said one day. "True, that's right," I replied, though it was painful to admit. Even after a year of marriage, we hadn't been able to conceive. Honestly, pregnancy depends on luck and timing. Just because we hadn't conceived in a year didn't mean we had to be disappointed. I thought someday we would have a child and live as a family with children. However, Ken seemed to have a different idea. "Isn't it abnormal not to get pregnant even after a year?" he asked, his tone laced with frustration. "Is it abnormal? But I think it's about luck and timing, not necessarily abnormal," I responded, trying to stay calm. "Then why haven't we been blessed with a child?" he demanded. "I don't know. Shall we wait a bit longer?" I suggested, but Ken shook his head vigorously and glared at me. "I get it. Maybe you have a problem, Maddie," he said, his voice cold and accusatory. "That's not possible," I murmured, but doubt had already crept into our marriage, and the cracks were beginning to show. I was stunned when Ken suddenly said something unexpected. "Problem? Why would you think that?" I asked, feeling a twinge of unease. What else could it mean if we haven't gotten pregnant even after a year of marriage? "There must be some problem," he replied, his tone insistent. There isn't any particular issue, but if you're concerned, should we get checked at a specialized clinic? I suggested, trying to stay composed, though his words left me with an uneasy feeling. Truthfully, I had been a little concerned myself. Friends had mentioned that early checks were a good idea, so I immediately made an appointment and went to the clinic for an explanation. At the clinic, they explained that tests were necessary for both the husband and wife since infertility could be caused by either partner. This made sense to me, and I went home to discuss it with Ken. So, the cause of infertility can lie with either the woman or the man, I said, hoping he would understand. I see, he replied absently, his mind seemingly elsewhere. Ken, you also need to get tested. Which day would work for you? I asked. Me, get tested? Ken was visibly surprised. Yes, as I just explained, you need to be tested too, I reiterated. But Ken's face twisted in annoyance. I'm too busy to spare time for that. Besides, there's no way there's a problem with me, he snapped. I was curious as to why he was so certain, but I decided it would be pointless to argue. So, I spoke as calmly as I could. We can't be sure there's no problem without checking. It seems we can't proceed with treatment unless both of us go to the clinic. He scoffed. Are you doubting me? I've lived healthily for 35 years. There's no way anything's wrong with me. Stop joking around. With that, he left the room. I couldn't understand why he was so adamant that he wasn't the cause. After all, it was Ken who first expressed his desire to have children. So why was he refusing to get tested? After that conversation, Ken's attitude toward me changed completely. He began complaining about every little thing. His dissatisfaction seemed endless, from house cleaning to grocery shopping. One day, he found a receipt I had kept for managing our finances, frowned, and asked with an annoyed expression, "What's this? What did you buy?" "What do you mean, suddenly bringing this up?" I replied, confused by his abrupt accusation. "Spending this much at the supermarket, you must be wasting money," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Wasting money," I echoed, feeling the sting of his words. His criticism was relentless, and I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the man I married. "I always buy a week's worth of groceries at once, which is why it costs this much. It's always been like this," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. But Ken slammed the receipt down on the table. "Excuses are no good. I've heard some housewives manage a monthly food budget of $150. Maybe you need to try harder," he retorted. Keeping the food budget to $150 was nearly impossible while ensuring we had nutritious and balanced meals. Since getting married, I had been doing my best to prepare delicious meals within a limited budget, focusing on both health and cost. But Ken didn't seem to appreciate the effort. Actually, when I lived alone during university and even as a working adult, it never cost this much for food, he said dismissively. But living together as a couple naturally increases expenses, I replied, trying to reason with him. Excuses are a sign of incompetence. If you can't manage household duties properly, then working outside is out of the question, he snapped. I had quit my job when we got married because Ken wanted me to stay at home. But now, with a smirk, he added, "That's right, someone who can't even manage household duties has no business working outside." His words cut deep. I thought to myself, I didn't realize you could be so cruel. "What's wrong? Are you going to say I'm the bad one?" Ken continued. "The wives of my colleagues all have jobs. You're probably the only one who doesn't work." He criticized me by comparing me to people I had never even met. Before we got married, Ken had never spoken this way, but now things were getting worse by the day. I couldn't understand when or why he had changed so much. It was difficult for me, with no special skills or recent experience, to suddenly start working. The pressure to find a job and the constant criticisms from Ken were causing my stress to accumulate day by day. But I knew that clashing with Ken wouldn't solve anything, so I suppressed my frustrations and tried to get through each moment as best I could. One day, while I was at home, my smartphone chimed with a notification. "That smartphone is annoying," Ken muttered. "Sorry, I'll put it on silent," I replied quickly. "Do you even have friends who would contact you?" He sneered, turning a simple notification into yet another criticism. "It's from my sister," I said quietly, trying to hide how much his words stung. I have a sister who is 3 years younger than me. Although we aren't very close, we maintain a moderate relationship. We've always been quite different in personality and interests, which has made it challenging for us to connect deeply. In the past, she often involved me in her schoolwork and club activities, which sometimes felt like a burden. Your sister Stacy, right? What does she want? Ken asked. Stacy had a baby, I replied. Oh, she mentioned before that she wanted you to bring me to meet her baby, Ken said. Yes, I confirmed. We briefly met when I visited my parents. The baby was adorable. Actually, we've been invited to their new home. That sounds nice. I'd like to see Stacy again after such a long time, Ken said, showing an unusual interest. It was rare for him to express interest in meeting my family or friends, so I decided not to dwell on it too much. We planned to visit Stacy and her husband John's new house. John, like Ken, is a busy businessman, but he was home when we arrived. We're here, I announced as we entered. How are you feeling, Stacy? I'm fine, thank you for coming, Stacy responded warmly. John is here too. Yes, I took the day off, John said with a smile. I'm actually on a 3-month paternity leave. It was tough to arrange work. Well, you've been so busy and hardly home these last 2 years, Stacy noted. Yes, I feel bad for making you feel lonely during that time, John said kindly, looking at Stacy. Stacy, the clingy one, and John, the dependable one, seemed like the perfect couple. Stacy cradled the newborn and offered her to us. Do you want to hold the baby? Just make sure to support the head firmly. As I gently held the baby, I could smell her faint, sweet scent. Ken leaned in and murmured, She's so cute. I wish I had a baby too. Given Ken's secret, I was stunned to hear him say that. I knew this was the perfect time to address it, so I decided to speak up. What? Isn't this child yours? I said loudly, intentionally drawing everyone's attention. Ken's eyes widened in surprise, and Stacy and John looked at me in disbelief. Come on, stop with the insensitive jokes, Ken said, clearly flustered. Why would you say that? It's impossible for this child to be mine. Stacy argued, That's ridiculous. Why would you think that? They probably thought I was making baseless claims, but I knew more than they realized. Actually, I know everything, I said. John is here, but can we discuss this now? John, sensing the seriousness in my tone, suggested, Let's hear what Maddie has to say. Thank you, I said, looking at Ken. You always talked about wanting kids. Ken looked taken aback by the sudden focus on him. Of course, it's natural for a man to want his own children, he replied. True, I continued. But why would that mean Stacy's child is mine? Ken asked. What does that have to do with anything? I pulled out my laptop from my bag. You borrowed my old computer once, remember? You said yours was being repaired. Maybe I did, but what's your point? Ken asked, his expression growing uneasy. When you returned it, you forgot to log out, I said. Ken's face turned pale, and he was at a loss for words. No way, he muttered. I had been suspicious of Ken's behavior for a while, his sudden department changes, coming home late every night, claiming to work overtime. It all seemed odd. When I got my computer back, the pieces began to fall into place. I was stunned when I stumbled upon Ken's new emails on my computer. The messages I read revealed plans to meet up with someone. Ken, upon seeing my reaction, was incredulous. Not logged out? That's impossible, he exclaimed. I can't believe you're accusing me of not logging out after using someone else's computer. Do you even know how to handle work properly? Not logging out is a sign of incompetence. Please stop, Ken, he pleaded, but I wasn't ready to back down. I've noticed changes in you and Stacy. If necessary, I can read the emails out loud right here. Ken's face went pale as he abruptly stood up, attempting to snatch the computer from me. I held onto it firmly. Taking the computer now is pointless, I said. The data is already saved. Save your effort. Frustrated, Ken shouted. Just because of a few emails, you think you can accuse me of an affair? That's not enough evidence. I responded, I've been suspicious for days. I could have confronted you earlier, but I expected excuses. That's why I gathered solid evidence before confronting you. I pulled out my smartphone and opened a specific app. After seeing the emails, something didn't add up, I said. I've been tracking your location for a while now. Did you not realize? Ken looked alarmed. You've been tracking my location. Since when? I planted a GPS tracker in your belongings, I revealed. I knew you were going to Stacy's house after work. Ken began searching through his bag, likely looking for the GPS. This matches exactly with the time you said you were transferred to a different department and working overtime, I added. No, That's not it, Ken said, trying to defend himself. I even checked with your company, I continued. Turns out, you weren't transferred. You've been leaving work on time every day. Who told you that? Ken demanded. I met his gaze steadily. I've been suspicious for a while. Ken shot back angrily. If you were suspicious, you should have said something earlier. And if I had, would you have answered honestly? I don't think so. What about your pay slip? I asked. You claim to be working overtime, but there's hardly any overtime pay. Isn't that strange? Ken was momentarily speechless, his frustration boiling over. I can't believe you've been sneaking around and investigating me like this. Don't change the subject, I replied firmly. What I need to tell you is that this child is yours. John, who had been listening in, looked visibly shocked. Is it true that Stacy and Ken have a relationship and that this child is Ken's? He asked. I'll explain everything, I said, but first, let me show you something. Stacy quickly jumped in. It's just Maddie's wild imagination. She's been watching too many TV shows or movies. Stacy's denial only fueled my resolve. Can you still say that after seeing this? I asked, pulling an envelope from a file and holding it up. John looked at the envelope with confusion. What is that? This is the result of a DNA test, I explained. They're quite accessible these days, so I decided to get one done. Does it show a parent-child relationship? Stacy asked, her voice betraying panic. Yes, it does, I confirmed. I had it done by a reputable institution, so there's no mistake. But results can be fabricated, Stacy argued. If you doubt it, so be it, I said. I haven't even opened this envelope since it arrived yesterday evening. Ken's curiosity was piqued. How did you manage to get a sample for the test? I used the tissue that I wiped the child's mouth with when I visited my parents' home, I explained. I carefully cut open the seal with a knife and revealed the test results. This is the test result. Ken's eyes widened in shock. You mean this is real? Yes, I confirmed. The test result clearly shows that Ken is the father. John, who had been busy with work while his wife had an affair with Ken, was visibly devastated. So you were having an affair while I was working, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. It's not like that, Stacy desperately denied. How is it any different? John demanded. How am I supposed to interpret your betrayal? Stacy started crying, trying to explain. I was lonely. I just wanted John to notice me, but he never did, Stacy said, tears streaming down her face. I know being busy with work doesn't justify an affair, but please forgive me, I will do it again, she begged. John pointed to the door, his voice firm. I can't live under the same roof as a traitor. Get out. That's when Ken seemed to have an idea. Stacy, why don't you come to my place? Maddie's there too, and she can handle the housework, he suggested. Stop it, Ken, I interjected. Don't make such ridiculous suggestions. You need to leave my house right now. Ken looked at me in disbelief. What do you mean? Isn't this house our shared property? I replied calmly. Have you forgotten? I was the one who signed the contract and bought the house. At that time, Ken, you couldn't get a loan, so I purchased it in my name. That's a separate issue. Ken argued, couples are supposed to support each other. I was fed up with his attempts to use lofty words about marital support to his advantage. Enough. Just leave. You're better off with Stacy. You're no longer needed in my life, I declared. In the end, Ken and I decided to divorce. Despite his reluctance, I didn't budge. I hired a divorce lawyer, initiated the process, and demanded fair compensation for my emotional distress. Ken lamented, I can't possibly pay this much. I retorted, you need to take responsibility for your actions. Aren't you ashamed, especially as a parent? Later, Ken married Stacy, but their relationship quickly soured. The initial thrill of the affair faded, and they seemed to be at an impasse. I continued to receive endless complaint emails from both Ken and Stacy, each filled with grievances about the other. Unable to bear their incessant contact, I eventually blocked them on my smartphone. They should be focusing on paying the compensation rather than wasting time on these complaints. Gossip spread quickly about their affair. Stacy complained about being unable to find a part-time job because of the rumor, but it was a consequence of her own actions. Ken, too, faced difficulties. He was losing contracts and credibility as people were unwilling to work with someone involved in such a scandal. He might have finally realized the severity of his actions, but it was too late. He was overwhelmed by the responsibilities of raising his child. As for me, I started working at a nearby craft store after the divorce. Crafting has always been a passion of mine, and I'm thrilled to be surrounded by it. I occasionally teach classes at the store and find immense joy in seeing my projects come to life. Sharing this joy with others has become a source of great satisfaction for me. You had saved up $400,000, hadn't you? I used that money to buy a new house. My mother-in-law, Jane, reported one day that she had bought a house without even mentioning it to me. Furious, I confronted my husband about the situation, but he began to defend his mother, saying, "Let's just let Mom do what she wants. Let's give up on the $400,000. I couldn't let such an act go unpunished and vowed to seek revenge on both of them. My name is Rose. I married Tom 5 years ago, and we both worked at the same food manufacturing company. Our demanding jobs made it hard to spend much time together, but we understood each other and lived peacefully as husband and wife. However, my relationship with my mother-in-law, Jane, was strained from the start. When I first met Tom's family to announce our marriage, Jane had said, "You're planning to quit your job and support Tom after marrying him, aren't you?" "No," I replied. "I intend to continue working after our marriage. Tom and I have discussed this, and he agrees with my decision to keep working." Isn't it normal for a bride to quit her job and support her husband at home after getting married? Jane continued. When I married my late husband, I quit my job and spent my life as a housewife. I found the notion that a wife should quit her job outdated but couldn't express this to Jane. I could only respond with a tight-lipped smile. Is Tom really okay with you continuing to work? When he comes home tired from work and you're not there, it will increase his burden. That's only your opinion, Mom, Tom said. I'm fine with it. Please let Rose do as she pleases. Thanks to Tom stepping in and stopping his mother, we weren't subjected to any more snide remarks and left his parents' house without further incident. I thanked Tom for standing up for me. If you hadn't intervened, I might have faced more unpleasant comments. My dad passed away, and since then, my mom has been raising me on her own, Tom said. She probably just worries. Don't think too much about it. I felt fortunate to be married to such a thoughtful person. As we headed back to our apartment, I reflected on how peaceful our life together had been. However, one day, after 5 years of marriage, Tom suggested living with his mother. "Hey, we often leave the house empty because of work. How about moving in with my mom?" he proposed. "Honestly, I don't like that idea," I said. "Is that so? Sorry for bringing it up suddenly. Forget I mentioned it." I was taken aback by the suggestion but relieved when Tom quickly accepted my response. We did end up living together, which was a relief. A week later, after Tom's suggestion, I returned home from a long day at work around 9 p.m. I was exhausted and muttering to myself as I tried to unlock the door, only to find it already open. Tom usually contacts me when he gets home, but he must have forgotten today. Entering the house, I called out, "I'm home." "Oh, you finally come back," Jane said, appearing in the living room. "Tom hasn't come back yet. He gave me a spare key." What? Tom had given a spare key to his mother without informing me? I was stunned and frozen in place. Jane continued, "Don't just stand there. Can you prepare dinner? I've been waiting for you to come back." Mom, haven't you eaten yet?" I asked, bewildered. "Yes," she replied, as if it was perfectly normal for her to enter my house uninvited and expect dinner. Her audacity was astonishing. I was reluctant to confront Jane directly, but I couldn't just ignore her. "Is that so? All right, I can only make something simple. Is that okay with you?" I said, noticing some ingredients were missing. It felt like the fridge was more empty than it had been when I checked yesterday. "Something easy is fine. Please hurry up. I'm hungry." "Please wait a moment. I'll prepare it right away," I responded, trying to accommodate her request. I quickly prepared a meal and served it to Jane. "Thank you. I'll eat now," she said. After taking a sip of the miso soup I made, Jane remarked, "What is this? It doesn't taste good." I was taken aback. Did she really just say my miso soup wasn't good? "It doesn't taste good. Didn't you hear me?" Jane's criticism was unmistakable. "It seems you can only make such meals because you're always busy with work," Jane continued. "You should quit your job and focus on the household." "But Tom says he likes the meals I cook," I countered. "That must be flattery. Can't you even understand that?" she snapped. It was clear she disapproved of my working after marriage. For the next hour, Jane continued to make snide remarks. I'll be visiting often from now on, so make sure you take care of the house properly, she said before leaving in a seemingly good mood after airing her grievances. About 30 minutes later, Tom came home. Hey, did you give a spare key to your mom? I asked. Oh, yeah, I did, Tom replied. I was surprised to see her suddenly at our place today. After making her dinner, she said it was bad. Well, these things happen. Don't worry about it, Tom said casually. What kind of attitude is that? I protested. She suddenly shows up, mocks the food I made, and you're telling me to just endure it. This all started because you gave her the spare key. Tom's temper flared. If you had agreed to live with her, it would have been better. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I don't need dinner. Am I to blame? You were the one who agreed to this, I said, feeling heartbroken by his response. The next day and the day after, the situation didn't improve. The room is messy and it doesn't look like you've cleaned properly. The laundry is all wrinkled and unsightly, Jane complained every time she visited. Her frequent visits and constant dissatisfaction were becoming unbearable. I might have been able to tolerate her remarks, but a week after she started visiting often, it felt like my patience was wearing thin. I noticed something strange. The food supplies were dwindling again, and the detergent we had stocked up on was also missing. Our apartment and my in-laws' house are only a 10-minute walk apart, and it was clear that the daily disappearance of food and household items was abnormal. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it seemed Jane might be taking them without permission. One day, when she came over, I decided to confront her, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. Mom, you haven't been taking our food and household items without asking, have you? Jane admitted it without hesitation. Oh, you found out, have you? It's not a problem for me to take things from my son's house. You're not home because of work, and it would be a waste if the food went bad. I was taken aback by her nonchalant attitude. How could she be so calm and unapologetic? I thought, indeed, it was Tom's house too, but that didn't justify her actions. Speaking of which, Jane continued, I should mention that you saved up $400,000, didn't you? I used that money to buy a new house. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. There's no need to pretend you don't know. You had it saved in a bank book, right? I was surprised by how much was in it when I opened it. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She used $400,000 of my savings to buy a house without anyone's permission, but you shouldn't have been able to withdraw the money with just the bank book. How did you get the PIN? Oh, you had the PIN written on a note inside the bank book, didn't you? Jane said with a smirk. I found it quite easily. I guess I should thank you for making it so accessible. I had let my guard down, thinking no one would look into my bank book. Indeed, I had put a note inside to remember the PIN. I was looking for a better living environment, and this worked out perfectly, Jane said, laughing as she left my house. Her actions were unforgivable. Using someone else's money without permission was beyond reprehensible. I told Tom about how his mother used my money to buy a house, but his response was infuriating. He acted as if it were none of his concern and said, let Mom do what she wants. Just forget about the $400,000. His dismissive attitude was the last straw. My patience with both him and Jane had worn thin, and I couldn't tolerate any more of their behavior. I decided it was time for some revenge. The next day, I invited Jane over to our house under the pretense of discussing the situation. Before she arrived, I discreetly activated the voice recorder on my mobile phone to gather evidence. Yesterday, you mentioned using $400,000 from my bank book without permission to buy a new house. Is that true? I asked her. Yes, it's true, Jane confirmed. I've already paid the down payment and construction has started. With the bank book, it's as good as bought. But just having the bank book doesn't mean anything, I pressed. How did you plan to withdraw the money? Jane smiled sweetly and said, I have the seal, don't I? So you took the seal without permission as well? I asked. Mom, that would be considered theft. Say whatever you want, Jane retorted. I never imagined someone who barely does any housework had saved up so much. At least it's somewhat useful. Fine, you can have the bank book, I said, trying to keep my composure. Thank you for coming today. I wanted to confront Jane in anger and reclaim the bank book and seal, but I restrained myself. I had secured evidence of Jane's theft and let her leave. Enjoy it while it lasts, Jane, I thought. The following day, I called Jane again to retrieve what was stolen. Mom, I don't mind giving you the bank book, but it seems personal identification is needed to withdraw the money. I'll go to the bank to withdraw it, so could you please bring the bank book and seal? All right, Jane agreed. I'll bring them over. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. I had no intention of withdrawing the $400,000. In this day and age, you can't access such a large amount of money without proper identification. Jane's naivety was astonishing. She seemed completely oblivious to the gravity of her actions, blinded by the lure of easy money. After retrieving the bank book and seal from Jane, I went straight to the police station. I need to report a crime, I said. Jane took my bank book and seal without permission and intends to use them to buy a new house. So, you're not the one making the purchase? The officer asked. No, it wasn't me. My bank book and seal were stolen. I'd like to file a report. The police took my statement seriously and accepted the report. That evening, when Tom came home, I informed him about the police report. I went to the police because your mother stole my bank book and seal. She might get arrested soon, I said. What? Why would my mom get arrested? Tom asked, sounding shocked. Because what she did is a serious crime. Just because you say, let mom do what she wants doesn't mean I have to tolerate her stealing from me, I replied. You didn't have to involve the police, Tom said defensively. Am I supposed to stay silent while she commits a crime just because she's a relative by marriage? I didn't save up all this money just to hand it over to Jane. Tom's face flushed with anger. So now you're calling my mother an old hack? That's enough, I said. I'm not going to let her get away with this. Tom stormed off to his room, only to return moments later with a divorce form. I never thought you'd say something like that. Sign this, he demanded. I was taken aback that he had a divorce form ready, but I was equally resolute. If this is how you feel, I'll sign it. Just get it over with, I said. Tom seemed surprised by my willingness to sign so quickly. After I completed the paperwork, he took the form and left. I showed Tom the divorce form. There should be no problem now. I'll submit this to the city hall myself, I said. It was clear he wanted to avoid facing me any longer. After our conversation, Tom quickly left the house, despite the late hour, likely heading to his mother's place. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Hello? I answered. It's Tom, came the voice on the other end. I told Mom that Rose filed a police report. Could you withdraw it? No way, I said firmly. Even if she's pretending to be remorseful, it doesn't change anything. I won't forgive her. She's likely to do this again. Another call came in. Hello? I asked, annoyed. I'm sorry, said a tearful voice. It wasn't Tom's but Jane's. She was crying and apologizing, but her tears did nothing to soften my stance. You think crying and apologizing will make me forgive you? You took not only the bank book but also the seal. How do you explain that? I've always wanted a single-family home, Jane explained. After living in apartments for so long, I couldn't resist using the money. I know it was wrong, but I've been managing our finances and saw the $400,000. I couldn't help myself. That doesn't excuse anything, I replied coldly. I worked hard for that money before I even married your son. You can't just make it right by apologizing. Reflect on this in prison. Jane tried to make another appeal. Please, I have a request. A request? Now? How audacious. What is it? I've already paid a $100,000 down payment for my savings, and I can't stop the construction. Could you lend me the $400,000, promising to repay it without fail? Are you delusional? I responded. There's no way I'm lending you anything. I can't trust someone who steals not just a bank book but also food and household items to repay me. What should I do then? Jane asked, desperation evident in her voice. That's your problem to figure out. I'm not responsible for cleaning up your mess. Why don't you ask your son to take out a loan? Jane's panic was almost amusing, but I had no sympathy left. Just as I was about to end the call, Tom intervened. Please don't abandon Mom. You were taken care of by her too. Even if it's not the full amount, please help her. Taken care of. She comes over every day just to criticize and has a spare key but doesn't help around the house. What care did she give me? I countered. Tom had no response, clearly grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to appeal to my emotions. I won't help at all. Good luck. Wait, I'll take care of Mom so she won't be a burden to you. Can we cancel the divorce? Tom pleaded. It's too late for that now, I said. Your mother is clearly the most important thing to you. You never protected me. I'm done. Enjoy your time with her. We'll be strangers by tomorrow. I hung up, turning off my phone to avoid more calls. Tom didn't return that night. They were probably comforting each other, and I was left to deal with the aftermath. I took a day off work to submit the divorce papers to City Hall. With that, Tom and I became strangers. Whatever happened to his mother was no longer my concern. During the 3 days leading up to my move, Tom and I barely spoke. I didn't initiate any conversation either. I planned to stay at my parents' house, an hour's commute from work, which was manageable. As I left the house that Tom and I had shared, he said, "I'm sorry for everything." I ignored him and walked out. It was a surprising end to a marriage that had once been filled with love. Yet strangely, I felt no sadness, only relief at being free from such a terrible mother and son. I couldn't forgive the hurtful words and actions. This outcome was a direct result of Tom's neglect and his constant prioritization of his mother over me. If he had taken a firm stand against her when she used my bank book to buy a house, perhaps I might have reconsidered. Jane and Tom had underestimated me. I wasn't going to end this passively. They would now face the burden of loan repayments, which was precisely what Jane wanted. They were both accountable for their actions. I reflected on this as I drove to my parents' house. A week later, the police contacted me to inform me that Jane had been arrested on suspicion of theft. It turned out that not living with her had been a decisive factor in her arrest. Had I lived with my mother-in-law, the case might have been considered theft among relatives, making an arrest difficult. I was relieved and thanked the police before ending the call. Jane would now have the chance to truly reflect on her crimes in prison. Just then, Tom called. "Hello. My mom got arrested." "I know. The police just informed me," I said. "With her gone, there's no way I can pay off the loan by myself. So what do you want from me?" "Are you asking for my help?" he replied. "No. Don't call me anymore," I said and hung up. To ensure he couldn't contact me again, I blocked his number and messages. A month later, a coworker told me something surprising. "Hey, did you hear? Tom quit the company." Tom and I worked at the same company, though we were in different departments, so we didn't interact much. With news of his mother's arrest spreading within the company, it seemed Tom found it too difficult to stay. I had no involvement in spreading the gossip and had no idea what happened to him afterward, but he was likely struggling with the loan repayments. 3 years later, I remarried someone I met completely outside of work, someone who truly values me. My new in-laws have welcomed me warmly, and I cherish them in return. I finally feel I've found true happiness and hope never to experience anything like before again. On a frigid winter night, I was jolted awake by a call from my mother-in-law. "Bring the wood for the fireplace to my room," she commanded. In this blizzard, I questioned silently, having just finished my bath. But Nancy persisted. "It's unreasonable for someone my age to venture outside in such a storm. As a daughter-in-law, you should act without needing instructions. How thoughtless of you." She continued to gripe on the phone, and while I had plenty of rebuttals, arguing seemed futile. After tucking my son into bed, I braved the snowy night and made my way to the storage shed alone. "It's freezing out here, and I can't find the wood. Is it not in here?" Just as doubt crept in, the shed was plunged into darkness. Startled, I rushed to the exit, only to find the door locked from the outside. Stuck. No way. Locked in. Did Nancy set this up? I felt a wave of despair, unable to predict what would happen next. My name is Mary, a 22-year-old housewife committed to caring for my family. I live with my husband Ken and our almost 2-year-old son Jason. I lost my father to a traffic accident when I was young, leaving my mother to support our family on her own. Working at a construction company, she single-handedly provided for my sisters Meg and me. Despite the hardships, she never complained and always wore a smile. She truly was an extraordinary person. Inspired by my mother's strength, I resolved to start working immediately after middle school, even though teachers and friends encouraged me to pursue high school for a brighter future. My determination wavered during the final summer of middle school when my mother expressed her wish for me to continue my education. When she learned that I planned to skip high school, she cried, blaming herself. Seeing her cry for the second time since my father's funeral broke my heart. I couldn't bear to add to her sorrow, so I decided to attend high school after all. Despite this, I took on a part-time job during high school to help support my mother. That's when I met Ken, 4 years older than me and a college student. He worked at the same convenience store where I had a part-time job. Among the part-timers, he was a dependable senior. Despite my hectic schedule, juggling morning newspaper deliveries and store shifts after school, Ken would kindly assist me with my tasks. His kindness and reliability won me over, and I found myself falling for him. After he graduated and was preparing to leave the job, I confessed my feelings, and we started dating. Once I graduated from high school, I began working at a supermarket. A year later, I discovered I was pregnant. When we informed our parents, Ken's family opposed our marriage, arguing we were too young. However, with my mother's heartfelt persuasion and Ken's persistent pleas, they grudgingly accepted our decision. At 20, we managed to have our wedding. Although Ken had siblings, his parents, especially attached to their eldest son, were hesitant to accept me, given that I was raised by a single mother. Their strong attachment to Ken seemed unusual to others. When our marriage was finalized, she confronted me angrily, saying, "Did you think having a child first would secure your place with my son? That's manipulative. I have no intention of accepting you into the family." Her words only deepened my anxiety about married life. Our new home was built right next to my in-laws. After we got married, Ken's parents bought the vacant lot next door for us. I repeatedly suggested to Ken that we reconsider living so close to his parents, but he brushed off my concerns, saying, "They can help with our child. It's not a problem." After the wedding, it became clear that Ken was heavily reliant on his mother, a classic mama's boy. He remained indifferent even when his mother spoke harshly to me. When I was ill during my pregnancy and needed rest, Nancy criticized me, saying my son works hard, and you're just lying around all day, neglecting the housework. What do you plan to do about it? Frustrated, I confronted Ken, asking him to explain to Nancy that my doctor had advised me to rest. However, Ken sided with his mother, saying, "Are you implying my mother is wrong? She's right. You're just resting and not taking care of the housework." His response was a blow to my spirits. I had relied on him during our part-time jobs, but now I was growing increasingly concerned about our future. My anxiety only intensified. Then, on a day marked by a rare heavy snowfall, Ken was out late for a meeting. While I was settling Jason into bed, Nancy called, "What are you doing, Mary?" Even though I told her I was in the middle of putting Jason to bed, she insisted that I fetch wood from the storage shed for her room, as she had run out due to the cold. In this blizzard, I hesitated, especially since I had already bathed, but she pressed on. An old woman like me shouldn't have to brave such a snowy night. As a daughter-in-law, you should anticipate my needs without being told. How thoughtless of you. Although I had several objections, I didn't want to escalate the situation. Considering how difficult it must be to be without heat in this cold, I decided to go ahead with her request. After putting Jason to bed, I ventured to the shed situated between our house and my in-laws. Amidst the snowy landscape, I unlocked the door with trembling hands, turned on the light, and stepped inside. As I searched the area Nancy had pointed out, I found no wood. "Is there really any wood here?" I muttered to myself, reaching for my phone. Suddenly, everything went dark. "What? This has to be a joke," I exclaimed, bewildered. I rushed to the exit, only to find it locked from the outside and immovable. "No way, I'm locked in. Did Nancy set this up?" I muttered to myself, feeling a sinking sense of dread. While I have faced harassment before, I never expected her to go this far. Outside, a rare snowstorm raged, and inside the shed, the cold was bone-chilling and potentially dangerous. I was also anxious about Jason being home alone. I tried calling Ken. "Hello." His voice was slurred, clearly indicating he was intoxicated. "Help, I'm locked in the shed," I pleaded, but Ken remained unmoved, scolding me. "You must have been careless to lock yourself in. Just calm down," he said, shifting the blame onto me. His response only fueled my frustration, and I ended the call, snapping, "Fine, I won't rely on you. Whatever happens, I don't care." Realizing I had been wrong to depend on him, I resolved to find a way out on my own. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed a small window at the back of the shed. I hurried over, only to find it barred and escape impossible. "I can't get out of here," I muttered in defeat, returning to the door. It was the only entrance and it wouldn't budge. Even in this desperate situation, I continued to search for a way to escape, knowing that my chances were growing slimmer. Shivering and exhausted, I pulled out my phone to call the police. As I fumbled with the screen, I heard voices outside. It must be the neighbors. I whispered to myself and called out, "Help." After shouting several times, the elderly couple next door finally responded. "Are you okay?" they shouted from outside the shed. "I'm locked in and can't get out. Please help," I cried, on the verge of tears. They quickly unlocked the door, and upon seeing my tearful state, they realized something was seriously wrong. They offered, "Why don't you come stay with us for the night?" Grateful for their kindness, I decided to take Jason and spend the night in the warmth and safety of their home. The elderly couple revealed that my in-laws had a reputation in the neighborhood for mistreating their daughters-in-law, and that my sister-in-law had also been locked in and had a heated argument with them. Knowing this, they had been worried about me. I expressed my profound gratitude to them and, exhausted from the ordeal and the snow, slept deeply through the night without stirring. In the morning, I was startled by commotion outside. I quickly dressed, left Jason with the couple, and stepped outside to find a crowd gathered in front of my house with ambulances and police cars parked nearby. "What's going on?" I wondered anxiously as I made my way back home. Ken met me with an angry tone. "Where have you been, Mary?" I explained. "Last night, I got locked in the shed, and after getting help, I spent the night at the neighbor's house." However, Ken's anger didn't ease. He told me that Nancy had been found collapsed in the shed early that morning. I wondered if Nancy had come to check on me after the night had passed. As I had tried to escape from the shed, I must have disturbed its contents, causing a mess. It seemed Nancy had entered the shed in the early hours, accidentally tripping over a ball, hitting her head, and eventually collapsing. She was taken to the hospital, but tragically she passed away. Ken and my father-in-law blamed me, saying, "This is your fault," despite my protests that I had been locked in the shed. They refused to listen. Realizing that arguing was pointless, I decided to divorce Ken and leave the house with Jason. My brother-in-law Jack said, "I will choose a different path for my father and brother. If Mary leaves, I will cut ties with the family as well." My father-in-law and Ken were enraged, insisting that I shouldn't divorce or sever ties so abruptly. Despite Ken's adamant refusal to end our marriage, my decision was resolute. "It's tragic that Nancy died, but I can't overlook what she did to me. I have proof that I was locked in the shed. If necessary, I'll submit the video to the police," I said, holding up my phone. Ken attempted to undermine the evidence by destroying the phone, but he never acknowledged his mother's actions. I was shocked by his inability to understand. "I should let you know," I continued, "that my sister Meg recently married a lawyer. The video from the shed can be used as evidence of emotional distress, and I plan to seek compensation. We will proceed with the divorce on that basis." Ken's demeanor shifted abruptly. "Wait, Jack is a lawyer? Compensation? You must be joking." "Not at all. What my mother did was inexcusable, and her death wasn't an accident. I'm sorry for everything, but we need to move forward with the divorce," I replied. After some negotiation, with my mother and Jack advocating on our behalf, I managed to convince Ken and my father-in-law to agree to the divorce. Just as my mother had pleaded when I married, she now argued on my behalf. And with the lawyer's support and the video evidence, Ken finally relented. He signed the divorce papers reluctantly, and the divorce was finalized. I gained custody of Jason, and we returned to my parents' home. On that snowy day when I was locked in the shed, my only focus was escaping, and I didn't have time to feel afraid. However, as time passed, the memories of that night resurfaced, causing me to panic and cry. With support from Meg and Jack, I decided to pursue damages from Ken and my father-in-law. The video of my confinement, along with testimony from the neighbors, substantiated my claim, and the lawsuit was recognized. Initially, Ken and my father-in-law were adamant about retaining custody of Jason, but when I argued, if the neighbors hadn't rescued me, who knows what might have happened. Jason could have lost his mother. I can't allow someone who would harm a child's well-being to raise him. They were left speechless. After that, they ceased discussing Jason. All subsequent negotiations were handled through Jack. After I left, news of my in-laws' reputation for mistreating their daughters-in-law spread, and Ken and my father-in-law were increasingly viewed with disdain by the neighbors. Additionally, when Ken's boss discovered the mistreatment and learned that Ken had chosen to attend a drinking party rather than rescue me during the heavy snow, he was enraged. Ken was demoted, and his professional standing deteriorated. Eventually, Ken submitted his resignation and, along with my father-in-law, had to sell their house and land and relocate. After these events, my brother-in-law and his wife also severed ties with my in-laws. Back at my family home, I asked my mother to reduce her work hours to help care for Jason. She was thrilled to spend more time with her grandson. I started working at Jack's office, and it was a refreshing change to earn a salary after being a housewife for so long. I felt a strong sense of responsibility to persevere, knowing how much my mother had supported us. Later, through Jack, I met a lawyer who is over a decade older than me. He is incredibly kind and gentle. Jason has grown quite fond of him, and we often spend our weekends together. We plan to marry next year and are currently building a new house designed to include office space for his new law firm. The house is also being built as a duplex to accommodate my mother, who raised Meg and me on her own. With deep gratitude for everything she's done, I am enjoying a fulfilling life with my family, cherishing each moment. Are you properly washing the sheets, Kate? My father-in-law remarked as he lay on them. The thought of this becoming a regular occurrence sent a shiver down my spine. If we had lived together, such bizarre moments could have become part of my daily life. Just imagining it fills me with unease. A new chapter in my life began with a divorce, driven by irreconcilable differences over living arrangements. My name is Kate, and I experienced divorce at the age of 60. Yet, despite what others might think about aging, I believe that at 60, my journey through life is far from over. I've even taken on the challenge of learning how to use a computer, a skill that once seemed beyond me. By teaching myself through books, I refuse to let age hold me back from embracing new challenges. It's not that I'm trying to compete with the younger generation. Rather, I still see myself as young at heart. Life has thrown its share of challenges my way. The trouble began after my husband, Tom, and I finally paid off our mortgage, a decade after purchasing our home. We were in our late 20s when we bought the house, and as we neared the end of the loan, Tom started to bring up an old topic. "What do you think about living together?" he asked. "Living together? What do you mean by that?" I replied, though I already knew. "I mean with my parents," he said. This was a conversation we had before, and my feelings hadn't changed. "Tom, I think it would be difficult. Your mother and I don't get along very well. If we live together, it will just make things worse for both of us. I'm happy with how things are now. We won't know how it'll turn out unless we try," he insisted. "Once we start living together, we can't just stop. You never want to try anything new." Tom had been suggesting this ever since we got married, even though he had been firmly against living together before the wedding. I felt relieved then, but after our marriage, he gradually changed his tune, as if he had been trying to trick me all along. I later found out that his mother, Jane, had been pleading with him, saying, "I'm worried about the future. Don't you care about us when we're old?" Without my knowledge, Tom had developed a sense of duty to live with his parents out of filial piety. I wished he had realized he had the right to refuse. I understand wanting to take care of your parents, but Tom knew about the tension between his mother and me. Still, he seemed unfazed, even as our relationship became increasingly strained. As we neared the final payment on our mortgage, his suggestions to live together grew more frequent and more pressing. Then, one Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I answered it, I was shocked to see my father-in-law, Mark, and mother-in-law, Jane, standing there with bright smiles. The early morning sun cast a glow around them, almost making the scene seem sacred, but I knew better. While I stood there, stunned by their surprise visit, Tom appeared behind me and welcomed them in with a cheerful, "Welcome back." "Welcome back," I thought. Normally, when visiting someone's house, you say, "Thank you for inviting me," and the host says, "Welcome." But Tom's frequent question, "What do you think about living with my parents?" flashed through my mind. This was troubling, and I couldn't just brush it aside any longer. What was happening? I followed my in-laws back into the room and found Jane carefully inspecting the antique cabinet. Unable to hold back, I asked, "What are you doing?" "Oh, there are quite a few scratches here," she replied, her tone full of concern. "It's a shame to replace it with a new one, though. Kate, you seem a bit clumsy. Please handle it more carefully from now on." What? I had chosen that cabinet myself, and after examining the spots Jane was pointing out, I couldn't find any scratches. Perhaps she was mistaking the natural wood grain for damage due to her aging eyesight. No, I have aging eyes too, but even I can't see what she's talking about. But this wasn't the first time Jane had made baseless accusations like this. It seemed she couldn't stand the idea of a daughter-in-law taking away her precious son. Despite how unfair her remarks felt, I decided to let it slide as usual. Suddenly, I noticed that Mark was nowhere to be seen. Just then, I heard some noise coming from the second floor. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized what was happening. I hurried upstairs, and to my disbelief, I found Mark lying on my bed. Not Tom's bed, face down. No way, I blurted out in shock. Kate, are you washing the sheets properly? Mark asked, completely oblivious to my horror. No, 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 I stammered, my voice rising in disbelief. Absolutely not. Please spare me that. My words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. What's that? Such insolence from a daughter-in-law. Mark snapped. This has nothing to do with being a daughter-in-law. Why are you sniffing someone else's bed? I shot back, incredulous. I was just checking if it's properly washed. There's no need for that, I exclaimed. Yes, there is, Mark insisted. It's a necessary check for someone who's going to live here. What are you talking about? I asked, my heart pounding. Really, the thought of living with such an insolent daughter-in-law is making me anxious already, he muttered. Living together. The words left Mark's mouth, and I felt my world tilt as the unexpected reality of his statement sank in. I stood frozen in shock as Tom and Jane appeared behind me. My, it's noisy here. So this is where everyone is, Tom said, oblivious to the tension in the room. Your father is talking about living together, I managed to say, my voice trembling. What's that about? Exactly what it sounds like, Tom replied casually. Huh? What do you mean by that? I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. We finished paying off the house mortgage this month, Tom said, so we've decided to live here with my parents. What? You decided that on your own? I exclaimed, disbelief turning into anger. I've been asking about living together for a while, hadn't I? Tom said, as if this was a reasonable explanation. And I said no, I can't live with someone who goes around sniffing people's sheets. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Did you say that in response to what Mark said? Tom asked, his expression showing confusion. I clenched my fists tightly, trying to keep my emotions in check. Well, don't worry about it, Jane chimed in, her voice sickeningly sweet. Now that the mortgage is paid off, your role is over. She smiled brightly, as if she'd just announced something wonderful. What? I retorted, unable to believe what I was hearing. That's right, Mark added with a scoff, waving me away dismissively. You're no longer needed. You can get out. I felt a cold realization wash over me. So that's how it was. For years, I had been nothing more than a means to an end for my in-laws, a wallet to help pay off the mortgage. Jane had been watching our lives closely, biding her time, never giving up on her dream of living together. Now that the mortgage was fully paid, she believed she could have her beloved son back, and I could be discarded like yesterday's news. Fury bubbled up inside me as the full extent of their manipulation became clear. Certainly, I bore some responsibility for letting things get to this point, but this house was important to me too. There was no reason for me to be subjected to so much distress. But then, in a flash of inspiration, I remembered something, a fact that suddenly wiped away my despair and irritation. All right then, that's fine, I said calmly, surprising even myself. Tom's eyes widened in shock at my unexpectedly smooth response. He had clearly never imagined that I would agree so easily. Perhaps Tom thought I would beg to stay or reconsider, but I was resolute. Up until the moment I left the house, he kept suggesting, won't you reconsider? But I stood my ground. Ultimately, we divorced amicably. A month after the divorce, while I was enjoying the freedom of living in a hotel, having lost my place to live, I received a message from Jane, my former mother-in-law. She insisted on meeting me. Although I found it bothersome, I agreed, slightly hopeful as I had an inkling of what it might be about. When I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet, I found Jane and the rest of the family, including Tom, sitting with gloomy expressions. As soon as she saw me, Jane's eyes welled up with tears. Kate, thank you for coming, she said, her voice shaky. What brings everyone together? Is there something you need from me? I asked, curious but wary. Actually, we received the notice of the division of assets from you yesterday, Jane began. Well, yes, it's only natural to proceed with the division of assets since we're divorced, right? I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. Yes, but the situation has changed a bit from before, she continued, looking even more despondent. How so? I asked, sensing that something more was at play. My question seemed to dishearten them even further. Tom's company went under, Jane finally admitted. I clapped my hands together with a smile. I saw that coming. It was only a matter of time. What do you mean by a matter of time? Jane asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. In recent years, Tom's salary had been decreasing, and there were signs like delayed payments last month. Those are typical precursors to a company's bankruptcy. How could you not see it? I responded sharply. Jane, who should have had Tom's best interests at heart, asked angrily, "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Tom flinched in fear, clearly rattled by the conversation. "I never thought it would actually go under," he mumbled. "Normally you'd notice such signs," I retorted, incredulous at their obliviousness. "Eh?" Tom stammered, surprised by my response. I immediately pressed, "So you didn't gather us here just to say that Tom lost his job, did you? What's the real reason we're here?" Everyone fell silent, momentarily lost for words. Finally, Tom spoke up. "The truth is, our house burned down. It was caused by my father's smoking. We suffered a huge loss because we decided to live with my parents." Stunned, I took a moment to process the gravity of their situation. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I had indeed anticipated Tom losing his job when I decided to divorce him. I was unwilling to continue supporting a self-centered, jobless husband. Moreover, if we had lived together, I would have likely struggled with the pensioner lifestyle of my in-laws and possibly the burden of their care. Divorce seemed like the best choice for me. However, I hadn't anticipated Mark burning down the house. This was turning into quite the story to tell. "I'm sorry to hear that, but it really is a tough situation," I said, masking my amusement. "Now that my parents have also lost their home, they have nowhere to live and don't know where to start," Tom explained. "So, you've become both homeless and jobless," I remarked, unable to resist pointing out the irony. "Please, stop saying it like that," Tom pleaded. "I'm technically homeless too, since I'm living in a hotel at the moment," I continued, "but I've bought a new house, so I'll be moving out of that status soon." "What?" The shock on their faces was priceless. Time to enjoy their reaction. "Do you know the high-rise condominium near the station? I'll be starting my new life there soon." A high-rise condominium? The mention of it instantly changed their expressions. It seemed a high-rise was a symbol of luxury and aspiration for them. My choice to live there wasn't out of desire for prestige, but for a secure and convenient living environment after the divorce. I wasn't even interested in the view. I chose a lower floor to avoid the hassle of waiting for elevators. "We'd like to live there too, Kate. Can you forget about the past and let us live with you?" Jane asked, desperation in her voice. "That would be great, Kate, please." Though I had half expected it, I couldn't hide my astonishment at their audacity, asking to live with their recently divorced former daughter-in-law. Could it be that Mark intends to bring calamity even to a high-rise condominium? "I'd like to help, but I'm no longer necessary to you all, remember? I was just a wallet to you," I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. "Actually, we've always highly valued your skills around the house," they claimed, backtracking quickly. "The house felt brighter with you around, Kate. You're considerate, beautiful, and incomparable to our son. Now that he's unemployed, he's beyond our control." Their son stood silently amidst the groveling, clearly uncomfortable. It seemed that no matter how beloved a son, if he couldn't support them, he was no longer of use to them. What terrible parents. "Well, if we all lived together, it might not be so bad," I said, feeding consideration, prompting shocked expressions from my in-laws and Tom. "It could be more fun than I thought." "What do you mean by that, Kate?" Tom asked, his confusion evident. "I mean it quite literally," I replied, my smile seemingly lifting everyone's spirits. However, facing my ex-husband again felt a bit awkward. "Well, if that's the case," Jane interjected cheerfully, "don't worry about it. Tom doesn't have to live with Kate." Tom looked surprised. "What? Why not?" Mark added, "That's right, Tom should live somewhere else. We'll take advantage of Kate's generosity." "Why am I the only one left out?" Tom protested. "You don't have an income," Mark explained. "We have our pensions, so we can contribute to food. But you can't." I really wanted to point out that moving into a high-rise and thinking food expenses would cover everything was naive, but I chose to stay silent and watched as the family conflict unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. "Then why don't you, who have a pension, rent another place?" I suggested. "You've lost your job and we can't afford such frivolous spending." "What if something happens?" Mark countered. What are you talking about? We're still young. Elderly people should. Tom cut him off. How disrespectful. We still have our youth. One of them retorted, if you're so young, then work and use that income for the future. I can't even take a bath or go to job interviews in this situation, Tom shot back. You can always wash yourself in the river, came the reply. Always thinking about yourself, another added. Huh, you say that as if you do anything yourself, was the sharp comeback. Who's a failure? Tom shot back. We don't need such a useless son anymore. Jane attempted to mediate, asking, are you really okay with this? But Tom's reaction only seemed to infuriate Mark further, showing no signs of backing down. Turning to me with a smirk, Mark said, this means we'll have more room, right? We're almost excited about starting a new life in the high rise. Are you misunderstanding something? My cheerful smile seemed to confuse everyone. The size of the room is fixed from the start. I have no intention of living with you. What do you mean, Kate? Jane asked, clearly frustrated. You only mentioned that living with many people might be lively, but you never said we'd actually live together. That was the impression you gave, Jane argued. It's good to see you, who abandoned your husband to live in a high-rise, finally being seen for who you are. You've always looked down on me, and now it's clear you want nothing to do with us. Even after your house burned down, Jane added, her tone sharp. Tom, directing a severe gaze at his parents, said, Kate is right. I thought honoring my parents was the right thing to do, but it seems they don't really care about me. The in-laws were left stunned by Tom's words, their expressions shifting as they absorbed the reality of the situation. I was wrong, Tom said, his voice trembling. Let's cancel the disarmament. So, Dad, you just want to rely on your son again because you can't live with me, right? I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. No, that's not it at all, he stammered. His face was flushed, and Mark, who had hit the mark, began to fluster. Witnessing this, Tom's anger was visibly rising, veins showing on his forehead. I refuse, he shouted. Parents like you, disarmament is fine by me. The in-laws, now in a panic, pleaded with Tom to listen, but he wouldn't hear any of it. He turned to me and said, thanks to you, I really want to start over. Really? Are you serious? I asked, incredulous. I am serious. You've done something that woke me up, Tom said. You still have feelings for me, but you. Stop with that hopeful nonsense, I replied. I was only thinking it would be amusing if, after all the cozy family attempts, the man who left his wife for his parents ended up quarreling with them. I've only seen you as a means for property division, Tom continued. Property division, I echoed. You still plan to claim that from me? In this situation? This situation. I couldn't care less, I said. Of course, I hurriedly signed the divorce papers because I wanted to leave, but I can still claim my fair share of the property division after the divorce. Be prepared. Wait, don't you really love me? Tom asked desperately. How can I love someone who has no place to live or a job? I said. That's only possible in a fantasy world. No way, this can't be happening, Tom exclaimed. Unable to win me back, Tom's anger erupted. He lashed out at his parents, blaming them for everything and starting the commotion. Before things could escalate further, I left the scene. As promised, I received my fair share of the property division. The amount wasn't large, but it marked the end of my relationship with Tom. He now struggled with reduced finances and became estranged from his parents. Living a challenging life, he tried day labor and spent nights in cheap lodgings or parks, leading a nomadic lifestyle. His age made it difficult for him to find stable work, and his parents, not attempting to mend their relationship with him, seemed to abandon him, relying on their pensions alone. Years passed, and Tom's parents remained a couple, solely concerned with themselves. On my end, I had investments I started before the divorce, allowing me to live relatively comfortably. Recently, I began attending a local class to deepen my programming skills. Though most of my classmates are children and students, I find the interaction refreshingly enjoyable. I feel as if I've gained many grandchildren, even though I don't have children of my own. A young girl named Livy, who showed an interest in knitting, has been learning from me during breaks. Soon, other children joined in, creating a warm, vibrant atmosphere. Despite various life experiences, I'm determined to continue living a fun and fulfilling life, true to myself.